just get along? Actually, yes. Let's talk about it with Rusty Wright and Mark Pinsky on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we are so glad you're here. I say it every time, and I mean it every time. You always have a seat at our table. You just don't get to talk. In case you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Matthew says he's been diagnosed with acute apathy. Is there a cure for that?
Who really cares?
And our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. Jinx is a rock musician, so there's a good chance he may lose his hearing before I totally lose mine.
What?
And our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John always gets nervous when his wife shops those very expensive places, like the grocery store or the gas station. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. Our Key Life app has just been improved, and George asks for you to help in testing the donate button. Just to make sure the donate button
make
works.
sure it works.
Quality control.
There you go.
And Kathy Wyatt is the soft, feminine side of the program. Some people think that Kathy is controlling, but she definitely is not. Kathy, did I get that right? I can't read your handwriting here. Guys, we have a great program, and with two guys that I like a lot. Mark Pinsky, and I have books in my library that he gave me that I couldn't afford to buy, that publishers sent him, and I just want you to know I appreciate that. I am now educated because of Mark Pinsky. He's a former staff writer for the Los Angeles Times, where he wrote about blood and guts and crime. And he wrote for the Orlando Sentinel, and he wrote about religion. And by the way, Mark and I, just like Rusty and Mark, have some significant differences theologically and politically. But Mark has done what some journalists don't do. He was always fair. Always fair. He never demeaned or put down. He reflected views from evangelicals that were better and fairer than those by evangelicals who wrote religion. So as should be understood that I admire Mark. He holds degrees from Duke University, and we'll forgive him for that. Columbia University. He's written for the Wall Street Journal, the USA Today, an investigative journalist specializing in capital murder cases around the Southeast. He wrote a great novel. No, it wasn't a novel. It was a story of a murder that took place near my home in North Carolina, and I was familiar with some of the people involved. Enough said. I admire Mark Pinsky, and I'm glad he's here, even though he's wrong. Rusty Wright, I've known since he was a baby. He's an award-winning author, lecturer, and syndicated columnist. He's spoken on 6 continents to audiences including academics, business and government leaders, and university students. Rusty has appeared on TV talk shows, and since he did so well on that, he finally reached the pinnacle, being on our program. And he also trains professionals in effective communication. He's written a number of books. One of them was a book on humor. And that book was a book from which I got a lot of sermon illustrations. But at any rate, I admire both of these guys, and I appreciate their taking their time to be with us. This started when we read an article called "Can Philosophical Opposites Get Along?" It was a newspaper article, and when I saw the title, I said, of course not, unless they don't have any convictions. If they don't have any convictions, they can join hands and sing Kumbaya and walk off into the sunset together. But I was wrong. And these guys demonstrate that. First off, where did you all meet? And did you like each other at the beginning, or was it an acquired taste? Let us know a little bit of your personal story and how you got together.
Yeah, we met when we were students at Duke in the late 60s, and Mark had a column in the Duke Chronicle, the student newspaper, called The Readable Radical. And he was very left-wing and quite involved in the activist movements there. And I was a recent follower of Jesus. I was involved with the Christian movement. Now it's called CRU. Back then it was Campus Crusade for Christ. And we had lots of differences about, politics and religion and other things, but I always appreciated Mark's concern for hurting people and his abhorrence of hypocrisy. And I think that's one of the big things that attracted me to him. Yeah. Mark, you may remember more about how we actually met.
I do. It's real clear in my mind. We had the Chronicle was on the third floor of Flowers Building, as it is today. And I was in the editor's office with a bunch of editors, all like-minded, I would have to say. And Rusty came and knocked on the editor's door, as I recall it, and said, do you print articles that don't agree with your views? And we said yes. And he offered us a column, and we printed it. But I will say that there was some smugness in doing so. We thought it was humorous that we would print what he wrote because it was so different, and not in opposition exactly, but just different from the way the Chronicle was. I refer to the Chronicle in those years as the newspaper's red period, when we did all sorts of things. But we printed the article, and I guess we congratulated ourselves on how open-minded we were by printing Rusty's column.
Well, that's did you talk about Jesus in your article, or did you sell out, Rusty?
The article, as I recall, they titled it "J. Christ Revolutionary." It was back at a time when the country was, filled with revolution. And so we were talking about Jesus as a revolutionary, someone who believed that it's important not only to, change inappropriate institutions, but also to change people's hearts. And so that's what the article was about. And so, yeah, it was very clear. And I had written, I wrote a couple other pieces for the Chronicle that talked in a similar vein. My approach was I tried not to be preachy, but just to present some things that would present an alternate point of view for people to think about. So I was very glad that they did that.
I suspect in those days that y'all mildly liked each other, but probably never thought you'd be best friends or be having beers together. What happened? I mean, did you lose track with each other and then run into each other at a bar or something?
Actually, it was at a press convention that we reconnected, but Mark went on to Columbia and got his master's in journalism, and I began to work with CRU and moved to Southern California, and Mark was with the LA Times, and I would read his articles in the LA Times, and a lot of them were about religion, but also other things. And I was a little surprised to see the Readable Radical writing stuff about evangelicals, but out there, I think your contact, Mark, was often the stories were often about televangelist scandals and things like that. And then you moved to Orlando to write for the Sentinel, and he began to write a lot of articles like you've talked about, Steve. And I was really surprised in the Sentinel one time to see an article where Mark was following Bill Bright, CRU's founder, around Daytona Beach as Bill Bright shared the message of Christ with spring breakers. And the article was very positive and I thought, what has happened to the readable radical? I was a little bit shocked here. So there was a press convention coming up in Orlando, and I also saw Mark's byline in Christianity Today, and I was a freelancer for CT back then. And so I asked our editor to connect us, and we did get together at that press convention. That's where we reconnected.
Oh man, that's good.
I
Mark,
started.
you wrote mostly. One of the reasons you came to Orlando is that you got tired of blood and guts, didn't you?
I did. When I started in the early 70s, I was single, and I could kind of disassociate with the violent stuff. But as time went on, I married, I had 2 children, and I was taking home some of the carnage I was writing about, and I didn't really like that very much. And I asked to be taken off the beat, and they said, no, you're good at it. And so, as often happens, I wrote a piece for the Columbia Journalism Review on the emotional toll that cops beat, courts beat.
Oh, yeah.
And I told my bosses the day before it was published, and that was the eject button on my career at the LA Times.
Yeah, that would do it. Guys, we're going to take a break because this is really hard work. I mean, this is sweat work. And we need our rest period. So we're going to have some cookies and milk. Then we're going to return. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with author and journalist Mark Pinsky and author and columnist Rusty Wright. They're friends, and they ought not be. In our culture of division and anger and hostility and canceling, these people, these 2 guys, absolutely stand out and can become a model for the rest of us. It started before that, but we read an article called Can Philosophical Opposites Get Along? And their answer is a resounding yes.
Hey guys, when we left it before the break, you were talking about how you had met at Duke and then kind of went separate ways, kind of reconnected years later at a conference. Wonder if there's anything more from there to talk about how this relationship evolved over the years from that point.
Yes, it really did become a good friendship. I lived in California, lived out there. I'm a Florida native, but I lived out there for 4 decades, and Mark was in Orlando. And so when I would come to Orlando, Mark and Sally's home would become my B&B when I was in Orlando. They very kindly welcomed me there, and I got to know them. And when you live with somebody like that, you get to know them well. And so we would just talk about all kinds of things. I should say that, growing up in Miami, I had many Jewish friends. And when I learned, as probably in grade school or junior high, that some people didn't like my Jewish friends because they were Jewish, I thought, well, that's pretty stupid. Yeah. So I've always had a very open attitude toward my Jewish friends and tried to be very kind and gracious. And that certainly benefited me in my relationship with Mark. And the Holocaust studies has been a real personal interest of mine. And so when we were in Orlando visiting the first time, Mark took me to the Holocaust Museum, which I think is on the same grounds as your synagogue, wasn't it, Mark?
Nearby.
Yeah, nearby. Okay, that's right, nearby. And, we have common interests in that. And then my late wife, Meg, and I would often go to the National Prayer Breakfast, and Cal Thomas, the journalist, had an event right before the National Prayer Breakfast, a dinner for people in the media. And Mark came to that with us several times. And Cal is a great bridge builder. And we just, enjoyed hanging out and spending time like that. So those are some of the fun things that I remember. And Mark was not as much into Duke basketball as his wife, Sally, and I are. And so when I'd stay at their home, Sally and I would stay up late watching the Blue Devils on TV, and Mark would be working on his writing, but he's getting better.
Mark, what was your experience? Tell us how you felt about that time. Were you thinking,
Well,
I just hope this guy will leave me alone? Or
no, I
were
think the way Rusty felt about the Jewish people was one thing, but probably more than that was I heard and sensed really early on about Rusty's commitment to fighting racism. And I didn't, in my mind, in my narrow mind at that point, did not associate white Sunbelt evangelicals with being anti-racist. But at his core, that came through with Rusty. And it wasn't just, a soul on the road conversion. He really felt it. And it was always a part of who he is and what he is. And although we have many differences politically, culturally, theologically, certainly, for a left-wing guy, I live a pretty Southern Baptist life. I mean, I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'm on my first wife, after 43 years. And also, I believe in bodily resurrection, even though I'm Jewish. And so the actual differences on a personal basis were far less than I would have assumed, again, with the narrow mind that I had at the time.
Huh.
I would emphasize, I add too, we really clicked on racism. I became a follower of Jesus in the late 60s when the campuses were aflame with revolution related to civil rights and so forth. And I remember attending a white church in Durham. I didn't attend it just because it was white, a small church, but because my roommate and his girlfriend liked the pastor. And so we enjoyed it a lot. And one day, one of our crew staff friends brought a Black student nurse to church. And the next week, the Black student wasn't there, but the pastor got up and announced that because of last week's racial incident, quote unquote, the attendance of the church elders had gotten together and decided to maintain their longstanding policy of racial segregation. And hereafter, any Blacks that showed up would be handed a note explaining the policy and asked not to return. And we were just shocked. And Rob and I and Ellen looked at each other and thought, what in the world happened? Because we love this pastor so much. Well, basically it was two redneck elders outvoted the pastor on this. And we went up to talk to him afterwards. And we did go back one other Sunday because we thought, well, maybe we could be a force for good there, but we just didn't feel comfortable with it. So that kind of thing really helped ignite my desire to help people see that Jesus wasn't racist and Paul wasn't racist, and followers of Jesus shouldn't be racist either.
Boy, the story makes me wince. I'm a Southern boy, and it does. It just makes me ashamed. I'm glad Jesus loved sinners, because and even that pastor, although he needed to develop a mean streak, if you're not meaner than your elders, you shouldn't be a pastor.
Yeah.
I guess question to both, maybe. From your journalist, putting your journalist hats on, I kind of have the impression, as non-related to journalism at all, that I don't know whether there still is a goal or virtue of trying to be objective. Steve was talking about how fair you were in your reporting. Is that still a goal? It seems so much like journalism, and especially on television and so forth, has almost become
adversarial.
That if you're not advocating for something, it doesn't exist, or even, journalism for entertainment or whatever. Is there still a goal or virtue in journalism for objective reporting?
Well, I think also the journalism of the internet has effectively pushed things in that direction. I've never believed in objectivity. I've always believed in fairness. I come to this with a worldview, and I don't want to pretend I don't have a worldview. I do, but it's always been my objective to be fair, particularly in representing culture different from my own, like evangelicals. And that was really my goal. And I wrote a book about it, ultimately, because it affected my life and my profession.
You,
Yeah, and Mark certainly has gained a reputation in the evangelical community too for being very fair, like what Steve mentioned. I mean, the press convention that we reconnected at was the Evangelical Press Association. And over again there, I ran into people who, when Mark's name came up, they talked about how fair he was in terms of dealing with evangelicals. And yeah, you're right. It really has become quite polarizing and polarized today. And sometimes people are just trying to, even news organizations, trying to see how many clicks they can get, how many viewers they can get. And I do appreciate fairness.
Hold it right there.
Seems...
I'll let you finish that sentence on the other side of the break. This is called a teaser in the profession. And if you guys go anywhere, you're crazy. Hanging out with authors Rusty Wright and Mark Pinsky, both of whom are my heroes. You can keep up with Rusty at rustywright.com. Not very creative, but you can remember it. And keep up with Mark Pinsky. Again, not creative, but you can remember it. Mark Pinsky. Pinsky is PINSKEY.com.
No.
SKY.
No E's, that's the trucks.
PINSKY.
His copywriter messed up on that one. I'll look into this as soon as I can.
Find that
Heads will roll.
copywriter immediately.
Notice how when I screw it up, these people love me enough to take credit for themselves. And if you go to X, formerly Twitter, at Mark I Pinsky.
Yeah. Lowercase l or I, who knows? But it's I believe.
I'm an old guy. I'm doing the best I can.
Mark, I start with you, and then we'll move over to Rusty. But a lot of times when an individual becomes familiar with someone with whom they don't have a lot in common, and they want to not even necessarily develop a relationship, but have something that's not adversarial, you tend to look for, people tend to use the term like common ground. Where can we go and find something that we can agree on, common ground or whatever? Is that what we should be looking for, or do we just need to get better at showing empathy toward people who are who think differently than we do? And is there a difference?
I think the first step would be don't assume what other people think or what other people are. Don't assume motive. Just go in with as blank a space as you can. And for me, pretty much everything is on the table but race. I mean, I can't find common ground with racists. I probably could, but I don't want to. I'm 77. I don't need to be nice to people I really don't think are nice people. But give them a chance to show who they are without assumptions. I don't know how Rusty looks at it.
Rusty?
I think that makes a lot of sense. What I try to do too is ask questions. I mean, maybe of a more personal, not an embarrassing nature or anything, but how'd you get involved in this line of work? What led you to do that? Was it something you were interested in majoring in college, or tell me about your family background, or you want to be careful and not seem to be too probing. But I think back, I learned a lot of lessons that have helped me in relating to people who differ with me when Mark and I were at Duke in the men's social group that I lived in, the fraternity house. We had political liberals, political conservatives, scholars, athletes, atheists, agnostics, Catholics, Protestants, Christians, Jews. And we had all kinds of differences, but we would debate the issues of the day: Vietnam, civil rights, the sexual revolution, the Jesus revolution, and we'd duke it out, so to speak, in verbal discussion. And then we'd go eat dinner together, or go watch a basketball game. And we still get together for reunions after all these years. One that was not too long ago, we had a lot of them. We had, I think it was 50 men plus significant others and spouses. And then spouses started asking if their ex-spouse could come. And we said yes. And then the ex-spouses started saying, well, can I bring my new spouse? And it was just a great, great time. And we loved getting along, and we still do. Just got I was at a reunion back in October with them again. And I think it's because we cared for each other and respected each other. We lived with each other and we got to know each other, and doing things outside of, work or debate or whatever really helped that.
We're coming to the end of this segment. The next one's a little bit longer, so we'll get into it a little bit more. But, we live in a culture. I've never seen the way our culture is so divided as it is right now. And it's not just let's disagree. It's you're evil and I'm good. And that means we can't be together.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you find families that are broken up, couples that go through divorces, longtime friends that have walked together that can't walk together anymore. And I tell you, it's not the convictions that bother me. It's that. And we've started, for instance, you said you don't like racist. Well, about everybody who believes what I believe is called a racist. And so real racism gets a pass, or at least goes under the radar. And I'm sure on your side of it, we called you pinko compies or commies or whatever. And it's just crazy. So what we're going to do on the other side of the break, we're going to find some commonalities. How do you fix this? By looking at these guys and how they fixed it. Rusty Wright is a Christian, strong Christian, professional Christian. Mark is a strong Jewish guy, professional Jewish. And they love each other. And they should. And if you don't agree with that, then you don't get anything. But we're going to get specific on the other side of the break. And you don't want to turn your dial off or your computer screen or your video. You want to stay there. And I don't want to be manipulative. But if you do leave, you'll get the fever and die. Appreciate your spending this time with us. It's in a busy schedule. It's a high and holy compliment, and we consider it that. By the way, if you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly Key Life email, you're missing out. So while you're thinking about it, go to keylife.org/subscribe, and then remain silent because it's free and you don't get to complain about it. Guys, and some of our insiders are able to listen to the conversation. What do they call that, Matthew?
Yeah, SB Insider.
Insider?
Yeah.
We record even when we talk in the breaks, so you've heard some of the discussion. But we decided that we need to make this a lot more public because we live in a very, very divided culture. And one of the things that you said, and I don't expect that from Jews. I really don't. I expect better from you guys. Now, evangelicals, we have guns and we go after each other, but you guys, I expect calmness and love and stuff, and you were saying that's not happening right now.
No, unfortunately, the North American Jewish community, to a certain degree, the Jewish community outside of Israel as well, has really been torn apart by the events of October 7th and the Gaza war. There's a lot of troubling discussions. There's a shifting, but rational discussion among us has become almost impossible. People are leaving congregations. They're dividing congregations, I guess, as if they were evangelicals, I suppose.
Yeah, we know how to do that. That's how we do evangelism.
Growth
and
opportunity.
really trying to read people out of the faith, which is not part of our doctrine. We don't have excommunication anymore anyway. We had it once, but it's been very disheartening. I've been trying to, with some Duke friends, other Duke friends, to write some pieces to get people to think in a conciliatory manner. As in much of my career, words mean nothing, no effect at all. But I'm used to that.
Rusty, you work. This is your field. What is it that you guys do that's different that is we can duplicate? Because I believe that most people are like all of us. I mean, we're not going after each other with guns. We really want to talk. I mean, we can disagree and even disagree strongly, but we can still be civil. And what can we do, Rusty? I expect you, an expert, to tell us.
Excellent question. I think having conversations is very important. I mean, Mark explained that he and I, when we met there in the Chronicle office, we had a conversation, and then we would have others on campus. I remember seeing him at a table once where he was promoting a cause. I forget what it was. And we had a conversation. I think the Duke basketball coach was being appointed to some board, the former basketball coach, and Mark thought it was a bad appointment because the people that were really giving the administration problems were not the, alumni. It was, people like Mark there on campus. But, I just remember, interacting with them and having good conversations. And I think there are two things I would mention. One is lift up examples of people that are doing this. There's an excellent editorial in a recent New York Times, April 3rd, by Stephen Breyer, the retired U.S. Supreme Court Justice. And the title of it is, "The Supreme Court I Served Was Made Up of Friends." And he basically is talking about this issue of all the polarization in the country. And he says you would think that these justices would be at each other's throats because they are on opposite sides of a lot of these cases. But he said you don't see them having personal rancor and sarcasm. They get together and play bridge together. They interact socially. And he says basically, if justices who disagree so profoundly can do so respectfully, perhaps it's possible for our politically divided country to do the same. And he ends by saying, listening to one another in search of a consensus might help. So examples like that. Now, some people, when I say the New York Times, I've read that since I was in secondary school. Mark's written for it. Other people think, oh no, why is he quoting the New York Times? Well, it's an excellent article. I would Google Stephen, Stephen Breyer, Breyer, New York Times for that excellent short op-ed piece. So I think lifting up examples like that and trying to initiate and engage in conversations can really be a big step.
Mark, you want to add to that?
I would repeat, and this is for my people, which is the sort of secular base of the Democratic Party, who they won't hear in many cases anything positive about evangelicals or about religious people unless they're black, and black evangelicals are okay. Whites, they're so reflexive of how they have fared in states where evangelicals are control of the political system, in red states and the heartland. They won't hear anything positive. And I've said, there are many areas of disagreement. I mean, they were trying to put forth legalized gambling in Maryland, where my brother was a member of the state Senate. And I said, Paul, I know you may not like these people politically, but you share the same views on the evils of gambling. So why not try to reach out to them and bring them into your cause on a case-by-case basis? a mutual friend of ours, the Reverend Joel Hunter, is very strong on what he calls creation care, which is also environmentalism. And that's an area where people can get together on both sides. If you find areas of what Kathy called, common ground, you can find it. And once you meet them on something that you work together on, you open your eyes about each other as people in a larger sense.
So it seems like in the application part of this that seeking to understand the other person versus winning them over to is that simplifying it too much? Should we just approach these challenging relationships not as some kind of intellectual conquest, but just to kind of find the humanity in the other person?
I think often when you get together, it's on a transactional basis. You both are for the same things. But in the process, again, you see people in a different light. And that's how Rusty and I have done it all these years.
We just and have conversations and not necessarily trying to convert the other person, but just to get to know them.
Simple enough.
Good stuff. Well, we've come to an end. I don't know where this time has gone. It's been great. Mark, you writing any books of late?
I am. Another cold case, unsolved murder with racial overtones. 80 years old.
Will you come on and talk about it when it's published?
When I have something to sell, you bet I will.
Rusty, same with you. Write something and let us know, and we'll sell it. Hey, love you both.
Thank you.
You guys,
love you too.
You guys shine. Keep doing what you're doing. It may not feel like it, but it's making a difference, and it makes a difference to me. Hey, y'all, don't go anywhere. We're coming back. A good hour. It really was. And some things that we need to hear. I want you to know, just in case you wondered, I'm probably the most opinionated friend you have. I have an opinion on everything, and I'm willing to debate everything from the incarnation of Christ to the color of the pews in a church. And as a result, I get into trouble pretty often. And so I need to hear this. I need to hear what they are saying because it's gotten really bad. There was a time when I could be opinionated and angry and get away with it. But you can't do that today. I mean, we're going to kill each other if we don't do something pretty soon. I'm not going to change my convictions. I'm still to the right of Genghis Khan. I feel very strongly, and as I've gotten to know Mark, we have disagreed strongly. I could give you a list of times when we've done that, but we're still friends. And so at least in one relationship, I've done it right. And I'm going to make an effort to do it right in some others. But the problem is they got to be willing to do it right, too. I mean, this isn't a one way. It's like a marriage. If one person wants to see the marriage go and the other doesn't, it's not going to. Both have to have a commitment. And I really believe, and I don't believe in the goodness of human beings, but I do believe that there's a general humanity that all of us share. And I think we would like to have peace rather than war. Kindness rather than anger, compassion rather than destruction. And I think that runs pretty generally everywhere. And we got to find others that agree with that and not change anything that is a part of our conviction basis. I am, after all, right. And you can't change things if you're right, but you can. It's a joke.
Are you done?
Never mind, I'm done. Who's you going to be on next week?
Oh, we have a great program next week. Our guest name is Shai Held, and his book is titled Judaism is About Love, Recovering the Heart of Jewish Life. And I just started reading it like this morning, and oh my goodness.
I mean, we're going to find some things that are going to blow you away. Some areas where there is a commonality between those who proclaim the name of Christ and those who proclaim the name of Moses. We're going to be, it's going to be fun. You ought to be here. We'll be here, same time, same place, next week. Hope you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide berth. I'm doing that, James.
No, but it drives you crazy.
Oh, zooming in.